Welcome to Discovering. It's time for another road trip camping adventure. We packed up the bedrock, hit the road, and headed west. We're here in the Porcupine Mountains for some camping, hiking, and brook trout fishing. And I'm back with Bernie for a look at beeswax.
Today we're going to be looking at melting old frames.
Sit back, put your feet up, the remote control down, and come on along. It's Monday night and time for Discovering.
The secret streams that flow beneath the cliffs of colored stone. Forest thick and healthy with birch and pine and oak. Surrounded by the greatest lakes this world has ever known. The black bear's awesome presence as he roams the hills and fields. Call of the timber wolf, the loon's lonesome trill. The eagle soaring high above, the trout lies deep and still. These are what I treasure, the only way I measure feelings that I have for this fine land. There is so much to discover when you're a long-time lover of northern Michigan.
Well, the high waters of spring have receded, and the streams are low enough that dropping a worm in for a brook trout has become feasible. I decided to head for the Porkies. I've been wanting to hike into the upper Carp River to see if I could find some brookies for quite some time. Specifically, the stretch from Trap Falls down to backcountry campsites GP 1 and 2. We decided to make a weekend out of it, so we headed out Friday and set up camp at Union Bay Campground. And since it was Friday, we figured a good way to start the trip was with a Friday afternoon fish fry. Actually, our Friday afternoon fish fry turned into a Friday night fish fry. Turns out we made a quick stop for some on-the-road lunch at Smokeless Barbecue in Iron Mountain. The pulled pork was delicious and very, very filling. The brisket was excellent too. And the ribs, coleslaw, fries, you get the picture. I don't think you could ever get full enough to pass up a plate full of freshly caught, freshly cooked bluegills. Not at all a bad way to start the day. The sun was up and so was I, overflowing with anticipation of the day ahead. To tell you the truth, I'm not very accustomed to campgrounds with the luxury of electricity. And let's face it, there's not much to plug in a 1963 Yellowstone. But I am indeed equipped to take full advantage if such a situation should present itself. Breakfast was followed by a short drive to the trailhead. The plan was to take the Government Peak Trail south to just above Trap Falls and fish my way back downstream to Backcountry Campsite GP1 where the river veers away from the trail. From there I'd head back out, hopefully with enough trout for dinner back at the campsite. The hike in was as scenic as I had hoped and come to expect. The Porkies are home to more than 90 miles of hiking trails that pass through the various parts of the park's 60,000 scenic acres. Most connect to some other trail, which connects to another and another. The opportunities to hike in the park are endless.
There's tons of day hiking opportunities here, yeah, depending on how far you want to go. There's some great, 12-mile loops that you can do, and other people just, maybe they'll tackle some of the longer linear trails. Maybe they'll walk 5 miles down, turn around and walk 5 miles back.
I wasn't hiking for the joy of hiking. I was hiking to fish. There is one spot along the way where the upper Carp crosses the Government Peak Trail. A spot where, with a little willpower, I'd pass right by in an effort to stick to my plan. Nope. Nothing here but chubs.
Some of the premier hiking are the trail along Lake of the Clouds area, the Escarpment Trail, and then also on the other side would be the Big Carp River Trail. Some of those, the views up there are just phenomenal. We constantly hear from visitors that they just didn't realize there was anything like this in the Midwest.
Trap Falls. Now that is hard to pass by. I went just a bit further upstream and my day of fishing began. I'd already concluded that the fishing on this river was excellent. The scenery alone was over the top. A trout fisherman's dream. Never-ending drops and small waterfalls. An irresistible pool at the end of every one of them, each with a hungry, waiting trout. I came to that conclusion long before my worm got wet. It didn't take long and I was on my way to a much anticipated brookie dinner. Then there's Trap Falls. If that's not just picture perfect, I don't know what is. I could stay here all day in this one spot and just fish. Or not fish. Just sit here. Doesn't get much better than this. Night's dinner.
There's a lot of different fishing opportunities in the park. There's lots of trout streams in the park that's all got a lot of the native brook trout in them. We've got several rivers in the park that get salmon or steelhead runs in them in the spring and or fall. And plus, a lot of people in the park will fish offshore, you know, just fish the big water, Lake Superior, the shore of Lake Superior from the rocky shores and catch anything from lake trout to steelhead. And I'm sure some people probably catch some whitefish and various other fish, coho. A lot of fishing opportunity here.
A lot of fishing opportunities indeed, and I plan to take advantage of more of them. But not today. Today I'm right here in the Upper Carp River and thinking of nowhere else. Well, there's dinner for Patty. My plan was to fish from above Trap Falls to campsite GP1. I actually probably fished only half of that. Next time I'll have to spend a couple of days out here and do some backcountry camping. There's so many perfect spots to drop a worm or a spinner. So much to see and take in. It'd be pretty hard to get yourself to hurry on this stretch of river. There are certainly other places that are easier to get to, but probably not many is hard to leave. It was time to put away the rod, zip up the backpack, and leave the river behind. Time to head back to the campsite for a little relaxation, something cold to drink, and of course, dinner. The hike in was a steady, relatively fast pace to get to my destination and get started. The hike out was more of a casual walk. I'm not sure if it was because I had time or it just felt right. Either way, the in and out were a great part of the fishing. Friday to Sunday. It's amazing the impact a few days here can have. While I was here, I forgot about all of the things I have to do back home. But when I'm back home, I won't forget about the things I did while I was here. The camping, of course the fishing, watching the sunrise over Lake Superior, and the amazing scenery. If the Porcupine Mountains State Park is not on your to-do list, you might want to consider adding it. You don't have to be a hiker, backcountry camper, a fisherman. You just have to enjoy the outdoors. The Porkies somehow cause you to slow down, to take the time to notice the things around you, things you might not notice without stopping to look. Simple things seem to take on a greater importance here, and mean something different than they mean elsewhere. "60,000 acres of virgin timber, secluded lakes, winding streams, miles of hiking possibilities, campsites of all kinds, cabins from one end of the spectrum to the other, and scenery that amazes me on every visit I make. The Porkies are one of the many unique and special things we are fortunate enough to be surrounded by here in the Upper Peninsula." Beeswax. It's used as a lubricant, waterproofing agent, polish for wood and leather, cosmetics, and of course candles. About all I know is it comes from bees. I talked with Bernie to find out more.
Today we're going to be looking at melting old frames. And you can take something that's ugly like this, that's really of no use to the beekeeper anymore because it's corroded and it's got stuff in it and it's just time to get rid of it. And we turn it into this beautiful candle. And it's pretty simple. There's a few steps involved. The first step is a solar wax melter. And that's what this is here. This is about 5 frames I've run through here so far this spring. And we have this much wax. We'll take that wax, I'll put it in a double boiler and get out the honey. And then I'll filter it. And if it's a big enough batch, then I leave it set in a crock pot for 24 to 48 hours to get all the molecules of honey out. Because if you have molecules of honey in your wax, your candles don't burn. The term wick, which is what burns, this really means wick. It draws up the puddle of wax off of here, and then it ignites it. So it actually burns above the wick. So if you don't have that, if there's any dirt in there, it's going to plug this up and it won't burn. Now, these are is not as forgiving as the tapers. The tapers are much more forgiving. I could almost take this wax down here and turn it into a taper and it would work. And it'll burn nice. But these aren't as forgiving. Then you can also turn them into decorative candles like this. I don't know that I've ever burned one of these. We've poured probably 100 of these out of this mold. People just love them, but they don't burn them, and they're more decorative. And that would be the same for the skept here. And you can see a little bee on there. My wife paints that. It's in the mold, but she paints it when it comes out. So it looks kind of nice. And you can see the bloom on some of these. This little haze on here, that's a bloom. It's a good thing. It proves that it's beeswax. Regular wax doesn't bloom, but only on rare occasions. So when you see this, you know you've got, probably have pure beeswax. And the different colors, there was something in the wax that didn't get cleaned out completely. And these, even though they get filtered 3 and 4 times, this one here is 40-year-old wax. That was wax from when I first started. It's over 40 years old. And I don't know how I got so dark, but you can see there's a bloom on it. And I poured it this winter. I started using it and making candles out of it and testing them, and they work real well. So every beekeeper, after they've been keeping bees for 3 years, should have one of these, because you got to start rotating your frames. The frames get contaminated. They get ugly. They get like this on the back side. This is not real good. Most people look at that and they'll laugh. That's really ugly. And the bees will not be very productive in something like this. So I cull them out every spring and put in new stuff, and that's how we start our spring. Well, beeswax comes from, obviously, the bees. It secretes from cells down in their stomach, and they do that when they're really young. And they make the wax, you give them foundation, and they draw it out. It's called drawn, and here's the way it starts out. And this is drawn. It's really not a true, what they call drawn. And they build this out with the wax. And when it becomes not usable anymore like this, I put it into a solar wax melter, which collects the heat from the sun, melts it down. Now what you're seeing here, this is just, you see how this isn't wax anymore. It's almost like a paper, and it's what's left after the bee hatches. Every time a bee hatches, they leave back this little thin film, and making the cell a little smaller. Another reason we want to get rid of them after a number of years, because the cells get too small and your bees get too small. So what happens in here is all this melts from the heat. I have a glass top, and runs down into the bottom here, and what's left is this. I'll take this out, and this is called a wedge frame. And I just pull this little piece of wood out. I can then pull out this plastic, put in a new piece of plastic, nail it back. Voila, I got my frame back. This is wax that I've taken out of the hives. And when you go through your hives, you pull out the wax that's where it doesn't belong. And so I save it. And this is just a couple of times going through the hives. By the end of the year, I'll have this a can like this almost full. I can put that in here, and it too will melt, and we'll get more nice wax for candle making.
Well, that's it for this week. Be sure to check out 906outdoors.com, where you'll find the 906 fishing report, TV6 weather, shopping, and more. Thanks for watching, and I hope to see you next week right here on Upper Michigan's very own Discovering.